There we go. All right. So I see HiSiv just joined. You're in private, so don't worry about it. We'll bring you in a little bit here. Use the private chat, and we'll start talking about the setup. Make sure everything's working good on your end. Carl, I'm a little worried. We still don't have Schopenhauer on your image there.
No, it's a bit of a problem with the avatar. Streamlab or with StreamYard, they're supposed to add support for avatars, but they still haven't put it in. So, just going to have to deal with me being peeking on for a while longer.
Well, it couldn't be the worst thing that happened in your week, because I heard there was something going on. I don't know how to segue this into your rant, so I'll just leave it be.
Yeah, to be honest, man, pretty decent week. I mean, the trads were out in force this week, so they were out there Bible thumping and going on about fucking Jesus again. So I got to spend a week trolling their hot takes. So it could have been a lot worse. I mean, since the move and all, I've been missing my family quite a lot, and I'm a bit homesick. So being told that I'll burn in hell for a week really helped. I mean, my Twitter feed this week was like Thanksgiving with my relatives. Well, sans the food. Oh, God, man, the food. I mean, Twitter's crazy, man. You have all these groups competing to be the most annoying one-note bangers. It's pretty much like dating an Instagram ass model, except she knows she's not smart enough to talk politics. Like, eat nothing but vegetables, eat nothing but meat, take the God pill, but only the Christian God, not those other fake made-up gods. Also make sure it's the right Christian God pill. Got to be non-congregationalist, Orthodox Catholic, all that other shit is heresy, and you'll burn in hell for that. I mean, I know Puritanism is as American as apple pie and school shootings, but for fuck's sake, people are using things like fornication, degenerate, mortal sin unironically. They're a shitty hat and a bundle of sticks away from a witch burning. Like, there's no middle in America. Every place has its crazies. To make up 5 to 10% of the population, the massive outliers, the champagne socialists in France, the alternative for Germany in Germany, Wilders in the Netherlands. I mean, most other people are reasonably, decently balanced and somewhere in the middle. America, no. You're either in great shape or on my 600-pound life. You're either a billionaire or struggling to pay your bills. You're either anti-gun or you think a citizen should be allowed to open carry a rocket launcher at Walmart. You're either anti-death penalty or you think people should get the needle for rolling through a stop sign. Fucking degenerates, am I right? And nowhere is this clearer when it comes to fucking, because everyone's invested in fucking, but not their own fucking, everyone else's fucking. I mean, the Soviets did this with money. Like, everyone in the USSR used to be real focused on how much their neighbor had. In the States, everyone's real focused on how much fucking their neighbor does, and not just how much, but what kind. I've never had people this obsessed with other people's sex lives ever. You shouldn't be spinning plates and having one-night stand. You should focus on vetting a good woman for marriage so you can have children. Should I assess sexual compatibility as part of my vetting? Because fornication means sex between people not married to each other. So if I fuck her before I marry her, that's technically fornication. Hey, fuck it. Maybe I'm just vetting all my plates for marriage. It's just that none of them are good enough candidates. I mean, after all, no true quality woman would be a plate. And, no true quality woman would have a one-night stand. But, you'll give her a pass on those years in college when she was finding herself and shoved more wood in her mouth than a beaver with binge eating disorder. Sure, she did gangbangs, threesomes, bondage, had her lesbian face, but she's changed now. She has a sun hat and knows how to make mac and cheese. She even does the fancy kind where the cheese isn't from a can. I mean, you can't really hold her accountable for that, right? She was young and didn't know the evil players, spawn of Satan, hedonists were using manipulation, trickery, spells, and sorcery to make her enthusiastically want to get piped down. She had to learn that sex shouldn't be a fun, mutually satisfactory activity based on lust and desire. It's something you grin and bear because you have to get a baby put in you by your good husband. Players need to stop ruining quality women. Dude, women have agency. They can make decisions. They happen to be human. But, if tradcons accept that women can make decisions and have agency, then the sun hat goddesses can't blame shift to players. And then the guys who wipe up the sun hat goddesses have to accept that they were never their wife's first option, but her backup plan. When he tries to spice the sex life up by coming on her tits, she acts like she just got hit with hydrochloric acid, and if she gets the drop of cum in her mouth, she has to run out and vomit. But back in the day, she did bukkake parties in college and chugged cum from a gallon jug. Hell, that snatch is so torn up, it looks like a pastrami sandwich from Cat's Deli. If he admits women have agency, then he also has to accept that his girl loves the D, just not his. And, it's hard to accept being a woman's 109th choice. That's why they're obsessed with virgins, because then she won't be able to tell how shit his sex game is. We're talking men who couldn't find the clip with 2 hands directions in GPS and who think the G-spot is on the 3rd floor of the parking garage. I mean, I can only imagine how scared the good quality woman is of her husband finding out the truth about her pre-son had life. How will a man who's this judgmental and angry about other men getting laid react when he find out his wife got raw dogged in a bus station bathroom by a guy she met on a Greyhound bus half an hour earlier? Like, once you accept women are human, have agency, and the same shitty evolutionary mind we do, you realize they make bad decisions too, driven by everything except their rational mind. But let's be honest, all the trad models are just attempts to control human behavior with reason. I've got a stable job, I want kids, I'm a great listener, I'm for responsibility, I'm well-educated, I'm polite, I go to church, I'm a great provider. Yeah, man, you score 10-10 for boring as fuck. And women hate boring more than anything else. And that's the problem with tradcons. They are boring fucking people. I would rather sit through a 3-week IRS audit than deal with these people. These people are so fucking boring. The second they open their mouth, you start looking for a way to kill yourself. You're in a meeting like, I wonder if I could slash my wrists with a paperclip. These are the people who have a schedule for what socks they wear on a given day. Boring, bitter, Bible-thumping, blockheaded bitches barricaded behind Bibles, building better beta by bitching out better bros for banging babes. It's bullshit and it's backward. Be a bachelor building bank and banging babes, break barriers, and go beyond the basics. Fuck you and the cross you rode in on. I mean, fucking hell, if Jesus was half as annoying as these twits, I don't blame the Romans for crucifying him. I'm just shocked it took them 33 fucking years to do so. And, the rant was supposed to end on that note, but then the cringe lord in chief himself had to start posting stupid shit again. It's almost like he was thinking, wow, Ryan and Carl haven't dunked on me in weeks. I mean, I guess he was feeling lonely or abandoned or some shit. And it's like every time I think I'm running out of material, like, how should you navigate this unlimited quantum spectrum? If you have never experienced vibrating and flow at the quantum level, it can be difficult to exist. It can be difficult to know where to begin. Buy my course and sign up for counseling. That shit doesn't make you sound intelligent. It makes you sound like you're opening up for Deepak Chopra in a Holiday Inn in Narnia. Rollo's a cult leader. I'll teach you to be a real man. Buy my healing crystals. Fucking hell, man. Rollo always said he was a lesser alpha, but I mean, how alpha are you when you alpha widowed half the fucking manosphere? I mean, fuck 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. These guys want 6 inches of Rollo Tomasi. I give him all the credit in the world, man. It can't be easy being Rollo. How much of a bitch does it have to be when a bunch of personal brand guys are a single white female? For fuck's sake, if all your content is about Rollo, he's not your enemy. He's your fucking muse. You shouldn't be posting about spirituality and making emotional appeals on Twitter. You should be outside Rollo's house with As Yet singing You're the Inspiration. And the thing is, it used to be like 1 or 2 dudes, but at this point, Rollo's alpha widowed enough content creators to start a fucking Spice Girls cover band. It's like, for the love of Christ. Like, and I'm not even sure what Rollo's doing to alpha widow all these guys. It's like all of them are acting like that ex-girlfriend who won't stop texting them. God damn it, man. Yeah. I'm not sure what to say anymore, man. It's almost depressing to watch this play out.
I'm gonna yeah. Yeah. I had me at the Spice Girls cover band bit, I'm not gonna lie. All I'm picturing is Stedman as Scary Spice.
Yeah, I wonder what their first hit is going to be. If you want to be my quality woman.
Yeah. Dude, the stuff is so consistent. You're right. It's just like, and I want to laugh more, but at the same time, we're kind of in the same general space. And so it kind of makes me look bad. It makes you look bad, and I don't like it. It's entertaining to dunk on him. My favorite part about the Stedman tweets, though, is when he tweets on about some random nonsense, and then feminists and guys in this space unify in that his hot take was garbage. It's like he's the one thing that'll bring together the world.
By the way, I just have to throw a quick shout out to John P. Campbell. He recommended that I use Leah and Perrin's Worcestershire for my Bloody Mary instead of the what was the other one, Heinz or something. And yeah, the Leah and Perrin's is much better.
All right.
But yeah, it's good though that feminists and red pill guys can agree on one thing.
That's true. All right. So bear with me here. I see. Hi, Siv. If you guys don't know, we got a special guest today. He's a bit early, but that's fine. I think he's awesome. If you don't know him, he goes by the name HiSiv79 on Twitter. Legal Smeagol is the thing on there. He's a lawyer out of somewhere. You have no idea. He's not doing the private checks. I think he's on his phone. I'm just going to add him now. All right. Yeah, I think he's not boomer and exposing himself there. Oh, no.
Full boomer.
Yeah, full boomer. All right, Siv, you're gonna have to turn off your camera. Yeah. So he had a great topic about what's maleness versus masculinity, that kind of stuff. Find it super fascinating. The one thing I wanted to talk with you about today, and I couldn't think of a really good theme to describe it, but I think you nailed it in your little rant, was when you were talking about worrying what other people are fucking. And I think that one's important because half the MGTOW community, most of the MRAs, anybody who screws dolls for a living, they all seem to be very concerned with what other people are doing with their genitals. And I think that's the worst message to give out.
I think so too. It's a one-note topic, and I think you should be focusing on what you're doing with your genitals, not what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly, and that trickles down all the way. Like you said, the trad girls, guys want some girl that they can, and it's gussied up in benevolence, but it's essentially control. Because I remember this. So it's a big kind of joke that I don't really like driving at all in the city. So my wife drives everywhere. She likes driving, whatever. I don't care. I'll sit in there and tweet when I'm in the passenger seat. And you'll get a nonstop barrage of traditional conservative guys saying, well, my woman doesn't drive. My woman would never drive. I drive her everywhere. And I'm like, hey, that sounds an awful lot like Shiara law. And they get real quiet after that.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things. It's like, I'm not sure if you remember the Sargon of Akkad video with the Muslims and feminists.
Vaguely.
Yeah, like if you take the most extreme radfems, they have virtually the same view of sex as Muslim men do. The real conservative ones. And, it's the same thing with the trad cons, because you go far enough with that trad con-y crap, and you do end up with, it's Sharia law, but you just have to put like a Jesus-y spin on it.
Pretty much. And that's the worst part, is at least Shiara law, they're just saying, we're controlling your shit. Who cares? The TradCon one, they love to act as if they're doing it as a benevolent savior. Oh, we're protecting you from your own agency. Here, you don't need to drive. Here, you need to cover up your hair. Here, you need to do this and do that. But we're doing this for your own benefit. It's so disingenuous.
Well, every manipulator is the same way. Because it's always for your own benevolence. The same thing with cults. It's like
I wouldn't know.
they have patterns for everything, so you don't really have to think. Because they will tell you what you should think in that given situation.
True.
Okay, let's see if...
All right. I'm going to try him again here. It looks like his camera's off. Smeegs, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Oh, wow. You're a lot bassier than I thought. You officially get the man of the podcast.
Well, I'm I'm very tall, so, don't have a tiny voice.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. All right, so here, help us out here with the audience for guys that don't know you yet. What kind of 30-second description of yourself would you give to somebody who had just met you on Twitter for the first time?
Attorney, father, married, Chicago area, traveled a lot, read a lot, kind of Christian, not very good at it. I think that's about it.
All right, that's good enough then. So yeah, I am impressed though. You put up a lot with so Carl and I are obviously very anti-trad and somewhat anti-Christian, and you do
I
take it
hadn't
off the
noticed
chin
that.
like a champ. So I got to give you credit for that. We do give you a lot of grief when we probably shouldn't.
Oh, thank you.
But so here was my question. For the guys that don't know, we asked you about what if you had a choice, what you wanted to talk about. And you brought up this,
Parabolic.
thank you, the parabolic masculinity thing. Now I had a chance to skim, but when you showed it to me, I was half cut on gin. So I didn't really get a really good depth on this one.
Well, I'm mildly hungover, so we're like equal now.
Oh, that's awesome. Everybody here is hungover.
Yeah, and when I say parabolic, I mean like it's a shape, like the trajectory of a rocket. It goes up, it enters space or stratosphere, and then it comes down.
Yeah.
Upside down U shape. You get the picture. So and this isn't my pet theory. I'm not a guru. I've gleaned everything I know from, because there's no such thing as a guru. Everybody gets stuff from other sources and repackages it and analyzes it and puts it forward.
Yeah.
So I first heard this in a book by a guy named Dr. Leon Podles, a book called The Church Impotent, which even if you hate the church, is a good read because it explains a lot about the church. Because you're in society with it, so it'd be nice to learn about it. And it shaped the West, which you're living in. So the theory is basically this: that, and it kind of dovetails a lot with current events, with all these shootings and these whack job guys. You kind of and another thing you need to know about me is I'm full of analogy. I use analogies for almost anything. So the analogy I usually use is like a rocket, the Saturn rocket or whatever, Apollo missions. Leaving the ground would symbolize leaving home, not having mommy cut your food for you, and more symbolically, leaving behind feminine things, feminine thought, being independent. And that's really the critical thing. Well, there's two critical pieces. One thing is just leaving home and having a job and being able to put on your pants by yourself and all that shit and balance your budget, be a serious person. And a lot of people can't even achieve that. Like these guys that are shooting up Walmarts and schools, they can't even do that because they've been coddled so much and their dad doesn't show them the way, and they're content to let their sons, languish. And then once you get out into outer space, basically, as the analogy goes, you were in your early 20s, maybe, or late teens, and you're really tackling challenges, and you're testing yourself physically and mentally all the time. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of that is to extinguish insecurities. Everybody has insecurities. It's a lie to say that you don't. Probably really insecure if you say you don't have insecurities. And you look back in the past, and from the beginning of time until the mid 20th century, or even late 20th century, boys always in all cultures had some kind of rite of passage. The pattern was never that boys leave school and they jack off in college for 4 years and go get a job and get married immediately. That was never the model. The model was always that they would leave and sometimes they were sent off to boarding school when they were 13 or something like that, or they went to the military when they were 16 or 18, or they couldn't find a job, so they went out to the California and the gold rush, did some of that crazy stuff. So that just jives with male biology. I mean, you're in puberty, you're physically strong, you're rebellious, you're going to tackle challenges. That's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to sit behind a book and and basically be cradled in femininity, because you're still under the watch of a woman somewhere. Whether you're in college or at home.
Yeah, well, here's the thing I found, though, on that is you're right that you guys used to join the military at 18, but it wasn't so much that they did this on their own behalf. It's that society kind of needed them. I did it on I had a post about masculinity, and when I went to Osterbeef, they had a Canadian War Memorial there for all the Canadians that went and liberated the city in World War II. Went down there when I took my buddy on his retirement from the military. Everybody there was 18 to 23 in those grave sites. And I was thinking back to a Remembrance Day, which you guys, I think you have Patriots Day. It's the same thing, like World War I and World War II vets. Well, anyways, but the guy was talking about what he was doing at my age. He basically got dropped off in Korea and had to blow up anything made out of steel. And these guys didn't go on their own and do it. Society just needed them. And so they kind of were forced to grow up. And I think that's the problem now, is that we're not really needed. Between automation, machinery, the Industrial Revolution, you don't really need a strong back anymore. And so guys have to go through, and I always refer to this as when, and this is another, here, speaking of analogy, when art was in the high Renaissance, everybody can agree that they liked the high Renaissance as a movement, Raphael, Leonardo, all that stuff. Once photography was invented, being able to naturally depict the world was no longer art. Photography could do that quicker, faster, cheaper, easier than art ever would. So art has been on like 100-year spiral ever since to try and define what it is. And that's where you get all this modern art is crap stuff from. And I think masculinity is in that same spot. So here's my question to you, although I don't even know if there is an answer, is that once photography is in there, what do we do to define men? If you get my analogy there.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think society is having all the problems it's having, why people are cracking up, and why people are buying guns, and things are kind of getting.
Well, yeah, but you buy guns, whatever. That's not a bad thing in itself.
Well, you understand what I'm saying? That and things are coming apart, and they're not going to go on infinitely, with men being these, shallow, what's the word?
Directionless.
Sunken-chested weaklings. Women are coming apart because men are not a counterbalance to them. We can't stop them from running amok because we're, because modernity, as you point out, has weakened us to the point where when I say we, I don't mean all of us, obviously. Some of us still have a spine. or we find it late in life, as I did. So it's as much technology as we have, and as enlightened as we think we are, we're still a part of nature, and there's a correction is beginning to happen. All civilizations fall. Ours is falling, ever so slowly.
Mine's already gone. That's not even an issue. It's this is my tinfoil hat of the day thing. Thomas Barnett, great international strategic advisor, and he's been bringing up a lot of what you discuss is the side effects of globalism. Now that we're having an interconnected global society,
right?
One of the things that's happening lately, because it's been the slowest one to adapt, is the free flow of labor, where there's always been free flow of food, free flow of energy, of security. Now with the free flow of labor one, you're ending up with situations where guys are not, and this is guys aren't able to follow that standard life script that we're biologically conditioned to, where a guy will basically get a job, get resources, use that to find a girl, to raise a family. That's like the generic life script that's been going through human populations for forever. And when a guy isn't given, not so much that he can't get it, but that the path to get there is non-existent, that's when the guys start going crazy. And that's how Arab Spring started. The Tunisian revolt was essentially an incel guy who got bullied by a female bylaw officer because he couldn't earn enough to pay the bribe, which was like a surrogate for him not being able to earn enough to get a wife.
Which one?
The Tunisian.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name. I have to go look it up every time because it's hard to pronounce. And that's kind of where Carl and I are going. And Carl will have to chime in after this to see if I'm on point or not. But because a lot of things that are left for guys, we don't have much left that we can do that makes that women can't do equally or better or good enough for society. And I hate to say it, but fucking is pretty much the only one that we can do that women will never be able to. And I kind of like that as, and I think you disagree with this too, as if you can't get women, then nothing else above that is going to be achievable in any meaningful sense. Yeah. What do you think, Carl?
Yes and no. I've long ago kind of likened, you're talking about Stedman earlier.
Yeah.
Whether you're TradCon or whatever it is that Stedman exactly thinks. And I don't think it's just as sidebar whatever. I don't think Stedman is dumb or something. I think he's probably too young to fully articulate what he thinks, and his theory or system of thought. We give him 5-10 years, he'll be able to elucidate better what he's actually trying to say. But
oh yeah, it'd be great if he could start a coaching business then. Quick sidebar here. Prussia Kid, two super chats. Thank you very much. The first one is Vlad the Impaler gets a bad rap, but he saved Christendom and had a great porn stash. All right. And your second one, another $2 super chat. Men's hobbies are a threat to today's women. I don't know about that. Never really factors in. Hey, Carl, I've been ignoring you for a bit, man. What's your thought on this stuff?
Enjoying the conversation. I think it's an interesting one because I think, I'm not sure who said it, but about 80% of people, they're not dumb, but you kind of have to do a lot of hand holding with them. They're not self-driven. And I think what we're seeing are people who don't have the discipline to drive themselves and control themselves. And then you have the people who get on the path, and you have people who are not able to get on the path. And when you have a guy who's not self-driven and who doesn't have a clear laid out path for him to grow on, he's just going to flail around and fail and fail and fail. And in the end, I think it's a big thing with notoriety. I think that's the whole the history of Columbine thing. It's that once people realize that you could get really famous and get really well known for doing something very, very destructive, it started to become a path for guys. They're angry with themselves, but they externalize that anger out on the world. So they have to blame something externally because the idea that they're the reason why they're miserable, it's just too harsh for them to take. Same thing I was kind of touching on with the rant when I say that the guys who are not getting laid are the guys most obsessed with other men getting laid because it reflects their personal failings.
Yeah, I would agree with like 95% of that. And I really would like to underline whenever we talk about, Tucker Carlson's pretty good about that, but pretty good about this. I know you guys, what we're seeing here with all this, modernity wiping out a man's ability to find work and such, and even have a purpose. It's a tragedy. I mean, there's all these guys that, especially if you weren't born tall and blue-eyed and, maybe you're born with a deformity or maybe you're just not smart. I mean, if you're, lose your hair when you're 18, like some guys do. I mean, what are those guys' recourse? What are they going to do? And those men in the past were able to either find something in life that gave them great purpose, or they're actually able to find a wife because they're able to find the resources to provide for a family. But what the hell are they going to do now? They can't get laid. They can't, if they're not terribly bright, they're not getting an office job.
Yeah, they can't do the alpha fucks or the beta bucks, in other words, if you don't mind the jargon.
No, yeah, that's precisely right though. And they, if maybe they can find some physical labor working on a crab boat or something, but there's a shrinking number of those because we're giving those jobs to either women, robots, or people from third world countries that are coming here. So, what the hell are those guys going to do? I mean, look at China. I mean, that's like that. This is like nature is going to, it's like that.
Are you talking about their plus 20% gender disparity?
In India and the Arab world, when nature finds a way. It's a cliche from Jurassic Park, but it's true. I mean, that is not sustainable. Technology will take us a long way, which it already has, but at some point these men are going to freak out and they're not going to be happy with sitting on their ass their whole life.
Yeah, well, that's always been the problem. If you get enough disenfranchised men to hit that to get over top of that hill, that's when problems happen, social unrest.
Yeah, that's what you see in the Middle East now. A lot of times it's because they have a lot of men there who have no no one gets up one morning and is like, yeah, I'm going to fly to Syria and join ISIS. That's not a career plan for most people. It's something that happens when you have a lot of disenfranchised men who have no way of getting a wife, no way of making a better life for themselves. So they join up with a band of rebels and they decide, okay, this society isn't working for us. Let's get rid of it and we'll reform it in our image.
Yeah, even though war is hell, it's better than the alternative.
And you know what? When at the height of the Iraq War, the U.S. Army, I can probably find this if I went to really find the article, did a study on suicide bombers and then their background, and they found that a plurality or a majority, I forget which, a substantial amount of the suicide bombers in Iraq were actually like depressed. They were jobless. They didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't have a wife or anything. Because Saddam had probably, and his people had, banged most of the women there or taken them as wives, right? And that's their culture. And there's no jobs there. So, if Al-Qaeda or whoever gives you, $500 to try to kill some Americans, you're going to jump at them. And the interesting, link here between this and masculinity and my parabolic idea, which is not my idea, but what I've subscribed to, is, and this also dovetails with some of these shooters, some of these random shooters, like the guy in El Paso who was angry about illegal immigration and stuff.
I wasn't, though. That was just his post hoc rationalization, but I hear you.
Yeah. I mean,
Did I kill your train of thought? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. The suicide bombers in Iraq, they're doing these actions out of perceived service to their community. Like they're, instead of marching off to war to serve their nation, they're strapping on dynamite or taking an AK and spraying it at an M1 tank. You know what I mean? So they're sacrificing themselves for their community the same way they would if they had a healthy
family they were defending.
Right. It's the mechanism is the same. You don't think about it that way necessarily. In these some of these shooters are still have that. It's kind of a perverted twist on it, but it's still like, I'm going to serve society in some way. It's in our minds. It's not a conditioned thing in men. It's something that, like, it's our purpose in life. We've been on the earth for however many tens of thousands of years. It's in our minds.
Well, here's a question. It'll be for Carl, but then totally pick it up after then. So with all those things you just said, and the understanding that we are in the most peaceful time that humanity's ever had, and it's probably going to get better when it comes to like lack of conflict, lack of opportunity to show your worth to the community by those kind of like physical sacrifices. And knowing now that women are increasingly not needing men in order to provide a healthy home life for their family. Healthy as in nobody starves. We could argue about the stats on what single moms do to kids, but with all those things in place, and they're going to get better from their perspective before they go away, what is it a guy does then? My first question, I'll answer to Carl first, but I'm curious what your answer is going to be after that, because I kind of think I know where Carl's going to go with it. Does the question make sense, by the way? I kind of rabbled because I didn't write it down before I
catch the question.
Yeah, well, okay, right now, Smeagol was talking about how guys still have that innate sense of protecting your community, the suicide bombers in Iraq, that sort of thing. So guys naturally have that need to be physical and protect. Attach that with the lack of need for men to be the providers financially in a family because women are increasingly able to do that. Considering these trends are going to continue before they go away, what is it a guy is going to be doing then coming out of that in order to not just be an Xbox and Cheeto layabout that just wastes away with his sex doll? Links in the description for my affiliate link to that.
Well, I think
I don't know, man.
one of the dirty things that we don't really talk about when it comes to automation and the knowledge economy and the service economy is that even if you go back 50 years, if you were really bad socially, or if you're smart enough to, well, you're not quite as dumb as a bag of hammers, but you're not far off, or you have some lack of skill, you could always find something to do.
Right.
Because, you'd need a guy to dig ditches, or you need someone to clean up at the factory or whatever. But now we're getting to the point to be in the knowledge economy. You need more and more education, and you probably higher and higher IQ. So we're going to get to a point where, let's say you need over 115 IQ to do a lot of jobs. And then when we're already there, that there's a lot of demand for social skills. Like you can't work in a certain, like our new lower level jobs are things like working at Walmart or something like that. And you need a decent level of social skills and basic hygiene and so on to do that. So you're going to get a growing number of people who are they're not smart enough to get a knowledge economy job. They're not social enough to do a service job. And there are no jobs left for them to have. So you're going to get a permanent underclass of people who can add nothing of value to society. And those people are going to become disenfranchised. So the question is, how do you handle that? Because you could do something like, I like the universal basic income for when everything is so automated that you don't need everyone to work. You just need 10% of the population to work and everyone can live a good middle-class lifestyle.
Right.
So you can do that, but even with that money coming in, so you're not starving, you're not homeless, you're still going to have that need to make a difference and that need to contribute. And how do you do that if, like, both you and I know, like, I do this as my side thing. This is one of my hobbies. So, but it's a bit of a creative thing. But what if you're not creative, or what if you don't have any hobby? You're just going to sit around, watch porn, and drink all day, which doesn't sound half bad, to be honest.
Well, the opioid crisis, that's my argument there. That's exactly those people you're talking about. They're completely shut out of the global economy. And all that's left is universal basic income, which I would argue that the Medicaid and Medicare are almost like a test platform of UBI, but it has that plausible deniability that you're not just getting universal income. It's because you're sick. I think Last Psychiatrist made the argument for that, and it was pretty convincing for me.
Yeah,
and that's why
people argue that for a long time, that you have a lot of things like disability and that type of thing, that's some places that's being used as a way to get people who can't get a job to get a decent lifestyle so they don't starve to death.
Yeah, which makes sense why everything is a diagnosis now, because diagnosis isn't disease. It's literally displaying an outlier trait. And so outlier traits are now subsidized.
If I can, guys.
Please.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. One thing I'd like that I've noted a little while back is, you talk about people about modernity kind of increasing and the need for high IQ and social skills and stuff increasing. It's going to get to the point, and I think we're getting there quickly, is to have kind of the traditional life path of a man is going to get it's going to be like having what's that phrase, a camel passing through the eye of a needle. I mean, it's getting increasingly difficult, and that's why you have this permanent underclass, and the elite men, so to speak, are getting fewer number, but they're getting more and more powerful, or more spoiled by their riches, so to speak, whether it's women or money, or both. And yeah, I mean, there used to be leeway in the, when I say the old days, I mean, as recently as the 80s or 90s, there used to be some leeway in life. you know, if a guy was coarse, if he didn't have great social skills or whatever, he could still have a very successful career, and with a white collar job.
Yeah.
But you know,
in my hometown, we still had a lumber industry before the softwood lumber disputes, and I watched that stuff die right in front of me, and it's amazing how many people died of cocaine after that.
Right? Yeah, shocker, right? Men lose a purpose, and they become self-destructive. And with the increasing feminization of society, and technology doesn't help that at all. It accelerates it, because now every man that says a bad word or makes a bad joke or makes a bad pickup line can be brought in for community ridicule, and that's how women think is communally and relationally. They don't think about the objective cause and effect of what's happening.
Yeah.
There's no give or take anymore. And you think about, and this is a bad example perhaps, but think about almost, like, man, I'm not going to use the example. I'll tell you guys later, and you can go.
That's all right. It's hilarious. I'm thinking, and this is going to be an old Navy story. I remember so I was a communicator, so most of the radio comms was me, and I got very good at it. And our combat officer was absolutely horrible. You're going to see why I'm talking about this in a second. And I remember every one of the morning briefs he used to give, we would wake up and start groaning because he would keep umming and ahhing his way through stuff. And we counted it one day, and he made 42 in 7 minutes. And it was just hilarious because he used to come up and he'd always ask, "What's my number?" Because we'd always tell him how many ums and ahs he did over it, because he was working on his speaking voice. And it was just funny there because I realized this is your first podcast, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, I got to hear what the second one is.
Well, no, yeah. The first one was with Mark.
Baxter.
Yeah, a long time ago.
I was gonna say that's a classic one. Carl was on there a few times, actually.
Yeah, it was a shame. It was a fun podcast. It was actually a lot of fun to do that with Mark.
Yeah, I did like those. What was it he called them again? I just remember that bluesy riff he had right at the beginning as the intro.
I don't remember.
Ah, damn, that's too bad. I just remember, because I liked his story too, because he had the extra long commute, single dad with his daughter, had lots of issues with stress and finance, and this is the part I loved, because most guys in this space, they don't come to the public until they have a finished product. But he was like a work in progress. He's like, "Come with me. I'm going to crush this shit. Watch me do it." And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, he has balls. I mean, I respect the guy.
Oh, yeah. You see so few of it. Like, Carl refers to it as blunted effect, but having those balls a lot of the time is just being beat up enough that you just stop caring about those little nagging fears in the back of your head. So that's the one thing I like. I don't think he liked me, though.
I'm not sure if he was a fan of me particularly either. He doesn't follow me on Twitter anymore. If that's on purpose or an accident, but whatever.
Oh, he's on Twitter still?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, definitely doesn't like me then.
He talks a lot about personal finance, which is a important topic, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
If I can dovetail or tangent.
Oh, dude, this is free form. You don't even have to explain. Just go there.
Cool. So his life is a little bit similar to mine in that, I talk about my kind of parabolic trajectory of men's lives. When you kind of get into the metaphorical stratosphere or outer space, and you're a young adult or an adult, and you're facing challenges for the first time, a lot of guys don't. I think with modernity, we don't have any challenges growing up. Mm-hmm. We just, go to high school. Maybe you play a sport or whatever. You get laid, yada yada yada. You go to party for 4 years and call it a degree, and then you start working and yada yada yada. And you're not really prepared for anything, and you get married because you found a girl that's cool, and you married your best friend, all that garbage. It's all very effeminate. It's all very cushioned, right?
Well, it's letting life happen to you, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're like Mark, and shit hits the fan, and you realize that there's been a great number of lies in your life, and I've realized that. Much later in my life than I would have liked, that there were a great deal of lies that I had been told or told myself. So you kind of have and here's where the analogy comes in, you have an Apollo 13 moment where you're out there and you think everything's fine. And you think you're getting ready to complete the mission. And then, oh, fuck, I have to reassess everything. I might die here, metaphorically speaking, and maybe literally, because guys commit suicide over this stuff. It's an oh shit moment, and you're an adult and you have to handle it. And some guys do, some guys don't. Some guys can fix their life and continue on with their mission. Some guys fix it, but they just spin off into outer space and never think about anybody else again. And some guys just implode. There was a guy in my area who was actually owner of a gun store, and he killed himself. I think he was ex-military. I think I didn't know him very well, but I heard this secondhand. He had a girlfriend dumped him or cheated on him, whatever it was, and he killed himself and burned down his house. And
wrote out to a T.
Yeah, it's just, it's I talk about, I've tweeted about this a few times. I get tired of saying the same things, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but men need to have the ability to men have the ability to either weather kind of emotional pain like that, or they can just shut it off and not care about people. Because men can, I've done a lot of reading in the last few years about the male mind, because nobody talks about it. Men are a mystery to society because society is run by women, and we've never had to think about how men worked, because when men had control, we were just running shit, right? We just lifted civilization out of caves and into outer space, and nobody really thought twice about it until women took control, and now men are the problem. And women are not curious people by any means.
It's an understatement.
Yeah, they don't know how men work. So in my reading about male psychology, it's fascinating, and you have to dive into it. I can give you a book list.
Are you crazy? I've still got Dawn to Decadence. You've given me the biggest slog of a read. I'm so pissed at you.
It's a long book. Dawn to Decadence is, Jesus, that book is the densest read that, next to Spengler, it's the densest read you'll have in your life.
And yeah, this is coming from a guy who reads Noam Chomsky for fun. I'm just putting that out there to you right now, you son of a bitch.
The book to read on male psychology is The Way Men Think by Hudson and Jaco. It's a husband and wife psychology team. They have a little bit of a liberal bent, but what they describe about men is utterly fascinating, and it's totally true. And it'll click when you read it. And you talked about Schopenhauer earlier, and he's profiled in the book as well, and a lot of other male thinkers and scientists and stuff. Really fascinating. But anyway, men have the ability, if we're happy with someone and we want to feel vulnerable with them and we feel safe with them, we see them as a person. Our friends, our mothers, our sisters, our girlfriends at the beginning of a relationship, or wives at the beginning of the relationship, and maybe at the end if it's a good relationship. But if a woman is too critical, or if we feel threatened by her, like we can't share our feelings with them, then they get turned into objects in our mind.
See, that's funny. There's actually a term for that we use in this space. It's called wife goggles. Slapping the wife goggles off of somebody's face. Because the guys are being aspirational lovers. Yeah, because if you date a girl and you marry her from like 23 is when you start dating, she's always going to be locked in time as that hot little 23-year-old of yours, even when she's 45. But eventually, if you lose that trust, it slaps those idealistic goggles off your face, and I would almost say it actually humanizes the person again, as opposed to that idealized version of them you had before. But I mean, that's just quibbling over semantics at this point.
Well, it kind of goes towards what you can always tell what guys are going to take the red pill and which guys won't.
Mm-hmm.
Because in order to do it fully, your idealization of women has to be taken away from you, not just of one woman, of all women. So when you're sitting there going, "Oh, girls are nice, their skin is soft, and they smell good,"
Yeah, like they're a monolith.
Yeah, that's an idealization, and we used to call it putting pussy on the pedestal. And in order to not do that anymore, you have to have your eyes brutally open. So that could be, you've been married 25 years and you find out that one of your kids was not yours, it's Chad's. Or, it's having a real crazy girl in your relationship who kind of proves all of those little things we tell ourselves about women and that we're told about women from we're 2 years old. And she proves that wrong through her behavior. And then you start to see other women doing the same thing. And it's very easy to see the guys who are still idealizing women while parroting red pill ideals.
Which is very...
I mean, I think they're different kind of concepts. I think there's, and this kind of goes along with how poorly tested men are. If you ascribed, in growing up and you start dating and stuff, and all the kind of common knowledge about relationships is it's certainly not red pill, but it's also very effeminate. It's also very what you call beta. And so there's guys are ripe for zeroing out, if you will, or heartbreak, because they for one thing, they're not ready because they're too young, or they're not
too inexperienced.
Well, it's not even experience. They're not independent. They're not truly independent. They're still dependent upon a woman's theory of a relationship. My dad told me one time, I think I was in college, that there's a study that women. He was basically peddling the women settle down when they get near 30, and this is a good thing. And they're wild before that, but then they'll settle with a nice guy. And that's like the theory of relationships that people put out there. Or I'm going to marry my best friend. Well, I'm not marrying my best friend. I'm marrying a potential enemy. She could be the best thing to ever happen to me, but and this is a kind of a squabble I have with red pill is men should not and cannot define themselves by what women think of them.
Hey, there's a good one.
Men have to think of themselves independently. You talk about Marcus Aurelius and his, I don't care to get into stoicism or whatever, but his point was you have to be the promontory, right? You have to be, a lighthouse. You have to be the Gibraltar's rock. And the point isn't that you're some unfeeling automaton, right? Or a man that feels no pain, because that's dehumanizing and nihilist. The point is to be individualistic and make yourself number one, but also conceive of yourself as an individual and not be defined by what a woman thinks. And that's
your own mental point of origin.
Perfect. And
dude, I actually love these talks. No offense, sorry to cut you off. I'll cut you right back. But It's funny how you describe a lot of things we have these pithy, shorthanded comments for, but I like hearing them eloquently described without the jargon. So thank you on that. That's kind of fun.
Well, thank you. And you look at relationships that work, and marriages that are wonderful, and that's kind of reflected in it. I saw I think I tweeted about this years ago, but some lady in my neighborhood was on Facebook. I'm not really on Facebook anymore, but she put up a big glowing picture of her and her husband with her arms around him and stuff, and she referred to her husband as my beast. And I thought that was perfect. Because in my new kind of thinking, men have to be primal enough and hard and animal enough, raw masculine enough that women respect them, know that they're not to be trifled with, don't have a dad bod, and truly, and this is the rub, they can, the truly complete perfect man not only can provide for himself, but even if his wife does screw him over, he'll be okay. He's not going to disintegrate. He can make enough money. He's not going to, cry. He's not going to blow his brains out or get hooked on porn. She knows that he is unassailable because, she can beat on his chest and like the waves beat upon the rocks. But
yeah, well, see, here's the part I kind of, and like I said, it's more semantics where I kind of disagree, is that you're describing it all through the female lens there. And I know you're not trying to, but it's she needs to know that this, she needs to know that. And if you want to get there, I consider that a nice side effect, but it's essentially just, I'm putting on my own mask before I worry about anybody else around me. And if everybody around you, wife, children, friends, whatever, if they add value to your life, of course, you're running at like 150%. That 50% extra, you can flow that out to everybody like a benevolent dictator. But that's the problem I find with the idealized thing here. And Carl will have to chime in if I'm going off my rocker here or what. But if you have this idealized version of women, you can't deal with them as the people they are because you're not looking at them. You're looking at what you think you're looking at. And so when you talk about this being this Gibraltar's rock or being the oak, whatever you want to refer to it as, I consider it as a healthy level of narcissism. I'm concerned about me and only me. And if people are valued in that they add to my life. Now, I don't mean that don't take that to 11 and means that's dehumanization and everybody else is a set piece in your life. But at the same time, as soon as you're with a girl in a relationship and she turns into a net negative, holding on to that thing is just bad for everybody. That's my thought on it anyway.
Well, I agree with you on that. It's a good point. I think what a lot of guys focus on, they want to get a girl. They don't care as long as they have a girl. That's why, you clearly don't get any women is like the favorite insult of everyone. Same thing, you're the biggest she's ever had while you're dating, and you're a little dick motherfucker when you break up. And it's the same kind of idealization. And I just think I can't imagine being red-pilled while you're in a quote-unquote happy marriage. Because at that point, you don't have a good exit strategy. But if you red pill when you're single, it's not really a big issue. But if you've never been in a long-term relationship and you've never had your idealizations of women broken down, that's going to be a really difficult pill for you to swallow. And you can see that on display on Twitter all the time with guys who are still living in, because I don't think of myself as tweeting very negatively about women. I view it as tweeting realistically about women. Like, women are people. Shocker. They have agency. They make mistakes. They exist in colors, etc.
I'll take issue with part of that.
The agency part?
Yeah.
I do pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I know this has been bandied about a ton, and it depends on what meaning of the word you are using, because agency, like a lot of words, has multiple definitions. But in terms of like taking responsibility for their behavior, or like saying I'm wrong in the context of a relationship, or you look at when women fail a test or do badly in school or at a job, they never say, I guess I'm not very smart. It's always, well, my professor was bad, or I didn't have enough time. I just don't do well on tests.
Yeah, it's always somebody else's fault.
Right. And it's
the definition I'm using for it is the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own free choices.
And women make their own choices, but it's not. And I think that's pretty consistent with what I'm saying. And they obviously, and this is the weird thing, is society has been cultivating agency in women for decades now, called feminism. but it doesn't jive with their psychology. They're pushed and driven to get a job and be a general in the army and be CEOs and be a mom and a CEO or whatever, but it doesn't jive with her psychology. It's arbitrary. It's not concurrent with her psychology.
Yeah, she wants consensus, so that's why she's there. Is because everybody wants her there.
Well, I do agree with you on that aspect, that we've been cultivating agency, but we didn't make accountability part of the package.
It's not taking root. Right? You can push them into spheres and make them do things. Women are very, very malleable. They have to be, or have had to be. But once they get there, it doesn't mean they're going to act like a man, because they can't act like a man. They can be ambitious like a man, but they can't take responsibility like a man. That's a male trait. Just the same way nurturing is a female trait. Men can be nurturing, but it's not natural. It's not, it's somewhat natural to us, but it's not what we are here for. It's not what we're satisfied by most.
Like I said, we preface this whole thing when we're talking about the bell curves of humans. We're talking about the middle of the bell curve here, so we can skip the outlier stuff.
Well, yeah, outliers, and I'm a dad. I can be nurturing, but it's not what I want to do all the time. Mm-hmm. You can do fits and spurts in various ways, and women can take responsibility, but they don't like to do it. They don't like to do it very much. It's possible. Women can say, "Oh, I screwed up that relationship. I did something stupid." But if they think about it too much, they don't like to do that very much. That's not their primary way of thinking. I'm talking about agency. They've had no reason to be agentic. Their natural, their minds are not geared for it on a basic psychological level. Here's a life hack I found a couple years ago or last year. You look up David Bakan, psychologist, and he's the guy that pioneered the social psychology principle of agency and communion, and the thought patterns of men and women. And it's really kind of a life hack for me, because I can recognize when I'm being too cooperative and when I'm not advocating for my own interests.
All right, lay it on me, Coach. I'm curious on this one.
Yeah, it's really the book is in fact, I'll grab it. The Dualities of Man. It was actually an essay. The Duality of Human Existence. That's what it's called. From 1966. I found it on Amazon, but it's his principles have been carried forward throughout the decades, and you can see a lot of studies that have been done on the shoulders of his work. But agentic thought, agentic patterns are, I think I've tweeted about this. I can retweet it so you guys can see it.
If you like, I was just curious what the life hack was there. We got voices and ears now. Lay it on us. I'm curious how you put it in your words.
Hang on, so I'll just go to the page.
All right. Well, here, while you're going, just tell us when you're there. I will say this: it is hilarious.
To get back to the point I was working on with agency thing, is it's convenient for quote unquote purple pill hacks and women alike to not hold women accountable, because the whole thing with oh yeah, she wasn't a slut, she was just tricked into bed by some player using sorcery and magic crystals. That conveniently lets the woman blame the guy, and it lets her future husband also blame the guy because it wasn't her fault. And it's this convenient thing that women have their choices and women need to be able to make their free choices, but the purple pillars don't want to hold them accountable for it. Because if you start holding women accountable on the same level you do men, you're going to get resistance. Because I think ultimately, evolutionarily speaking, men out hunting had to be individually accountable, because one man making a mistake can get every other man killed.
Right.
So their biggest threat was someone not being accountable for their mistakes. But when it comes to women, their biggest threat was being kicked out from the group. So if they were held accountable for their mistakes and got kicked out of the group, they would die. So
the tribe would eventually die.
Yes, they got just really, really good at diffusing blame and blame shifting. And a lot of this is, you see a lot of this in guys who are a bit feminized too, is that they will never hold women accountable for what they're doing. And if you call women out and try and make women accountable, you get a lot of resistance and you get painted as a negative Nancy.
And then, you know what, Carl, to that point, guys that refuse to hold women accountable, well, there's two pieces of this. And you can't make women accountable because they're not going to, but to refuse to point out that women are erring, or that in and of itself is effeminate, because you're just, I think
you're worshiping the Venus of Willendorf, the female goddess that does no wrong, fully omnipotent,
and that's submissive, isn't it?
Quite a bit.
But you're just showing that you don't understand women, and what their limitations are. When I think women are wonderful, I've been accused by a few people of being, purple pill or blue pill or whatever, because I don't, because I still believe in marriage and some quote unquote tradcon stuff. But that doesn't make me blue pill. I don't have a pill. I don't like the dichotomy, but
yeah, well, don't think of it as like a group identity. That's that weird clubhouse masculinity crap. It's mostly just a Texas sharpshooter thing where you take a cluster of behaviors and then draw a circle around it and give it a name. It's mostly just a shorthand designation. So when somebody's saying blue pill, they don't mean you're actually a blue pill card carrying member.
See, I like to think of I like to look at, whether it's Stedman or you guys or myself or whoever. I think I don't think all this stuff is mutually exclusive. I think it could be kind of a lattice work of beliefs that form a fuller picture. So I think I should take it all in. And,
yeah, well, it's not really even beliefs. It's just strategies or tactics. Carl and I try really hard to keep the belief part out of this, because the last thing that this needs is an ideological bent of what you should do. I hate the should. Those hypothetical imperatives are much better. That if you want X, do Y. Y gets you closer to X. That I love, because then it puts the onus on the individual guy to have his own goal, as opposed to just a sheep looking for a shepherd, which is what got us into this mess anyway.
And I found that passage. So if you guys want me to, I can rattle off some of this stuff like I'm being called on in class.
We're here.
All right. The terms agency and communion characterize two fundamental modalities in the existence of living forms: agency for the existence of an organism as an individual, and communion for the participation of the individual in some larger organism of which the individual is a part. Agency manifests itself in self-protection, self-assertion, and self-expansion. Communion manifests itself in the sense of being at one with other organisms. That's the effeminacy right there of identifying with women and saying, oh, it's not their fault. Well, it is, but they can't help it. That's my editorial there. Agency manifests itself in the formation of separations, communion in the lack of separations. Agency manifests itself in isolation, alienation, and aloneness. Can confirm communion in contact, openness, and union. Agency manifests itself in the urge to master, communion in non-contractual cooperation. Agency manifests itself in the repression of thought, feeling, and impulse, communion in the lack and removal of repression. One of the fundamental points which I attempt to make is that the very split of agency from communion, which is a separation, arises from the agency feature itself, and that it represses the communion from which it has separated itself.
So in other words, guys like to protect, to grow, to expand, and girls like to assimilate to their environment. Is that a fair summary.
Women are kind of like the Borg. Yeah, yeah. Women, and to the extent, and these are just like patterns. So men can. It's like a sliding scale for both sex. Women can be more agentic. They can be what he calls unmitigated communion. So if I'm sure you guys have known women who don't have a dad, or have had some bad relationships, and they simply can't stand up for themselves anymore, and they're just drawn into relationships and can't leave them because they can't think about anybody. They can't think for themselves. They can't stand up for themselves.
Yeah, well, Carl brought up a good point on this one. I think he's probably going to come on to talk about this, where I think it was you, Carl, where women expect to be treated how they think they deserve to be treated. So like those kind of girls that have really shitty upbringings and that, they kind of internally think of themselves as a bit of a piece of crap. And so when you treat them well, they tend to sabotage things because that's not what they're expecting.
Yeah, it's kind of the hoe housewife thing. It's girls have a way they expect to be treated based on the way they have been treated. And that's what they think they deserve. So if you treat them better than, let's say you take a girl who's complete, well, let's just say slut. She sleeps around. She usually goes for the type of guys who smack her up a little bit and so on. If you start to try and date her and you're a nice blue pill guy, take her out to dinner, buy her stuff, bring her flowers, etc., she's going to think there's something wrong with you, because why are you treating her so different from how every other guy is treating her?
And the messed up part is that she assumes you're trying to lie and manipulate her to be bad towards her. That's the messed up thought pattern there.
I think that's also called borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
I've actually
all girls have like borderline. I stand by this. The borderline personality is just all feminine traits dialed to 11.
Because that's literally what diagnosis means.
Well, because all girls do the exact same behaviors borderline girls do. Borderline girls just take it to the massive one end of the spectrum. So like a normal girl might, when you dump her, she might, rip up all your photographs or do something kind of tiny and petty like that. BPD girl says fire to your house. Normal girl has a couple of orbiters in the back pocket in case she decides that she doesn't want to be with you anymore. BPD girl has a fucking rogues gallery.
Well, that's the thing. Narcissism and BPD, or NPD and BPD, they're essentially just extreme male and female characteristics, because that's the whole point of disorder. It's not that it's a disease. It's not something you can give a pill to cure. It's you take the 100% of human behavior, draw a bell curve around it, and then at the third standard deviation away from the norm, just call it a disorder.
And it's funny you bring that up, because that's what Bacon talks about in this essay. The flip side of unmitigated communion is unmitigated agency, and it's basically whether you're Christian or not, the concept of Satan, the concept of the devil in Christianity or any other religion, whether it's Hades or what have you, that figure, whether it's Satan or Hitler or whoever, evil men are that is representative or manifested, the manifestation of unmitigated agency. Men who only think of themselves and only of their own power. That is also a danger. And I'm sure we know guys like that.
I've vaguely met one or two randomly in Florida.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. Like, and that's kind of I think the point of being a man should be, I think, to find that zone of thinking only of yourself and only of your own power and expansion and your urge to master. And there's a great German word that Freud had for this, but I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it. Your urge to master and to expand your interests. You got to find that feeling in yourself and then dial it back, like one or two clicks.
Yeah, well, I call it a healthy level of narcissism, but I think it's the same. I think we're talking about the same thing here.
Yeah. I mean, it's you have to represent yourself, and here's another trick that men have these days: is are they really thinking for themselves? is what you want as a man, is that what you want, or is that what has been put there by someone else, by the media or your mom or whatever? Or, you know, are you following what your friends are doing, or are you doing what you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's, men haven't been thinking for themselves for a long time now, but through other people and through the media and stuff. So you gotta find what you really want to do in life, and then you have to chase it. No one else is going to do it.
And it's hilarious. I have not had a client or a consulting call ever where I always ask the question, so what is it you want at the end of this call?
Right.
Or at the end of this thing? And no guy has ever had an answer for me without having to think a very long time over it.
That's why they're there, because they
don't know.
Yeah. Right.
And it's hilarious because just by making that obvious to them, like they never even thought that that was an option. And usually, even if you get what is everything from Reddit, field reports, tell us about your problem and we'll see if we can work out a solution. They'll tell the story as if the female is the protagonist of the story. Like you can't even be the protagonist in your own life story. It's a really fascinating thing once you've seen it for a while.
I mean, a lot of guys are sitting in the sidecar while some woman in their life is driving a motorcycle, and it should be the reverse.
Yeah, and Carl had to get stabbed before he did that. Actually, here, guys, I have to go to the bathroom. Can you guys carry on for a bit?
No. Take the laptop with you.
Yeah, I don't think we want to get it. Fair enough. Ryan had me on earlier when he was making coffee, and you know his kitchen is kind of a mess. I don't think we want to see what his bathroom looks like. Obviously, not a Jordan B. Peterson fan. Peterson would not approve.
Right. Which, you know, people rag on Peterson, but I think he can be, you know, if you're a guy that is just going to latch on to one thing and run with it, and to the exclusion of all else, then Peterson's not the best thing. But if you're going to continue and develop kind of a lattice work and a greater understanding of the world around you and of yourself, I think Peterson's okay. He taught me a little bit. The Lobster story was helpful to a degree, but I also skimmed a lot.
Well, my thing with Peterson is I have the same issue with Peterson that I had with Jung. I think Jung did a lot of good psychological work. Some of his stuff is interesting. But when he gets into the esoterics and the spirituality and he kind of departs from the real world, that's where I have kind of an issue with him. Well, see, I like Peterson's Bible stories thing, for instance, where he interpreted the Bible stories as, not really sure what I want to say he interpreted it as, but I thought that was interesting. But I just think when you get too far into the issues of, you know, collective consciousness and that, it becomes a little bit too much of a new age bullshit generator thing for me.
Oh, the masturbatory part of it?
Whoa, what?
It's self-flagellation. Yeah, I think if I caught right, I know I just jumped in out of nowhere, but the philosophy thing, I hate that because guys use that as a crutch so often. As long as you're making progress in reading the next biggest philosophy thing, then they treat that as a surrogate for actually achieving anything.
Well, one thing I would challenge you guys to do is think, you know, we flatter ourselves that we are completely conscious, and all of our decisions are consciously made. When the reality is that, you know, symbols and mythology and
they have a use.
There's so much going on in our subconscious that is driving our subconscious, or excuse me, that is driving our conscious. The same way, you know, the gas in the car is allowing you to steer it. And you're not, you know, you talk about this, you know, philosophy and things aren't real life or whatever the people are rattling on about, but it's just on a different plane than our conscious mind. But it doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just not something that you're able to really detect.
Yeah, and I agree. And here's the thing: I think I might be able to recommend you a book. Have you read Mark Twain's "What Is Man"?
No, but I've heard people mention it before.
I think you would actually like that one. It's very Plato's Republic, where it's got that conversational style between an old man and a young man. And I think the point you're getting at, and the way he describes men is like an iron steam engine. And the the engine is the man, but it never actually did anything of its own cognition. Everything was influenced by the outside. So the rock had the metal inside it, but the rock had no desire to become refined. It took men with hammers to do that. It took a forging for an engineer to take that metal and turn it into an engine. Basically, everything about a man isn't his internally. Like, it doesn't wellspring out of a vacuum. It's that everything happens from outside influence. So I agree with you there.
I think that's precisely right.
But here's the thing. Yeah, we don't brag about that stuff, though. Like, we don't talk about that incessantly as if that's, like, once you have that tool, you kind of throw it away. We're not riding bikes anymore saying left pedal, left pedal, turn left. We're talking about where we want to go with the bike. And and
you know, to what we were talking about last night, that is a part of men that is completely ignored, which is that men are made, men are built. They're not. We don't. You know, it's not. We're not women. We don't just turn 12 and turn into men overnight or something like that. We have to be built. Yeah. And who's going to build it? Society can't anymore. Feminism has destroyed that ability. It has to be done by dads or uncles or someone close to the boy.
And half the dads are basically outside of the kid's life too. So I mean, we're so far gone from that ideal that we're up to random dudes on the internet having a podcast on YouTube talking about it.
Yeah,
how sad is that?
Or you have married men who are just picking up books and figuring out for themselves. Mm-hmm. And I agree. It's a terrible state we're in. But that's you know, talking about Bruno, if I can talk about him for a second.
Oh please, that peach.
He said something a little while back about his son, and I just let him do what he wants, and I'm not gonna tell him what to do. He's a big boy now, and I thought that was utterly ignorant, because that assumes that boys turn into men the same way girls turn into women. And but by the passage of time, right? He'll just grow into a man. No, he fucking won't. No, he won't. He will, as I described earlier, he might leave home, he might stop calling his mommy every day, but he doesn't know how to be a man until someone fucking tells him how to.
Yeah.
And it makes me angry, because there are men who are literally dying or suffering or turning into nihilists or what have you.
Because of that boomer take on parenting.
Yeah, because guys like Bruno are confused and stupid and foolish and don't know that and I'm sure Bruno's father or grandfather took him out in the woods and taught him how to be a man. I'm sure
he taught me how to cut hair with rocks and sticks.
Don't get me started with the whole hair cutting thing. Everybody knows that real men cut hair.
Yeah.
Although I take that back, my grandfather was a barber, but I don't think he was a little grittier guy than Bruno.
Yeah.
But that just reveals ignorance, doesn't it, of the male condition? That he'll just wait. When he's 13, he'll roll out of bed and be a man. Nope. Yeah. Nope.
That's what I love about our generation too, because you and I were kind of like right in the middle of the Gen X millennial line, which is kind of neat. But in that we had those parents that did that, so we already know the outcome. So we may not have the answer, but we know what it isn't, and it's exactly that stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and it did, in a way, you can't fault these boomer parents, because they grew up in a society that was masculine, and they learned how to be men because society did it for them. They still had rites of passage. They still had hardships they could conquer. It wasn't completely feminized. But the world that they brought forward, the boomers brought forward, is totally feminized. And there's no challenges for boys to face anymore that aren't like set up in front of them. So if you don't understand the mechanism of how this functions, like Bruno doesn't, you can't help men. You can't help. Maybe you can help men, but you can't help boys. Or men that are mentally still boys in some respects.
Well, I think it comes down to it's a lot of the time you don't explicitly teach. It's about demonstration, because when boys would be working out with their fathers, their uncles, and their grandfather doing things, that would naturally impart lessons as you go along. So you do have that rite of passage, but you also have sort of an apprenticeship. You apprenticed with your dad and your grandfather and your uncles to become a man.
I like that better than rite of passage, the apprenticeship.
And you don't have that anymore, because when you went to an industrial society, then suddenly all the dads were working, and their boys were usually working with men in the factories at the time, so you still had it. But over time, when you got labor laws and people don't hire 12-year-olds to run down in the mine anymore, you took away that natural boys maturing into men through spending time with other men, and now they have to artificially make it. So you want to teach your boy how to be a man, so you buy a luxury tent and you have, internet with you, and you have a generator, and you go camping and you rough it for 2 days with no shower, and you shit in the woods.
Yeah, and you play t-ball on the weekends, or
it's just trying to do something. Or you take them to the range and you do 2 clips, and then you go back to working.
Magazines.
He's European. Cut him some slack. Don't go full Rhodesian on us here.
No, the reason actually, I know the difference, but the reason I said it was I think the sentence worked better with clip instead of magazine.
Yeah. How was it they used to tell me that? A clip's what you hold the magazine up with, or something like that. I don't remember. And that it's not a gun. Guns you put on tanks. It's a rifle. All that same lame crap. Anyways, whatever.
Yeah.
Where are we going with this one? Yeah. So here's the thing. Obviously, there's no male influence on guys. Half the guys, their dads have been estranged from divorce, whatever. The other guys have female teachers growing up all their lives. So it's essentially not there for anybody. Right. And then you get to the guys who are adults. And this kind of adds to that delayed adolescence thing where bros before homes, guys don't know what they want to do. They kind of need a roadmap. And I always joke, my saying was feminism had 3 generations to define men in the modern age, and they failed miserably. So step aside, the nerds on the internet got it from here. And so far from what I've seen, the only people I've seen step up are former pickup artists, which is hilarious. I find it very funny. But that's the thing. Just setting examples. Like just us sitting here on a podcast, being able to drink and talk about stuff and cuss and swear, that's like bare minimum adulting male banter. But the fact that it's so novel, and guys were even saying in the chat, this is probably going to get banned soon. But like that's where it starts. All these little small things, and guys will do that. Maybe it'll be online because those are the tools we have right now. But getting the guy to the gym, that's why it's always like the first thing that you tell anybody who wants to get red pilled, or I would say even blue pilled. Go hit the gym, because physical hardship and long-term rewards based on short-term suffering is like a bare minimum entrance exam. If you can't do that, then get back to your fuck doll on your Xbox.
Well, I do think that the whole reason why it's a lot of old pickup artists doing it is that one of the things you have to keep in mind as a man, the ultimate test, like you can say women are here to give birth to babies and men are put here to impregnate women. And getting good at that through practicing pickup, you put yourself in the line of rejection so many times that you're numb to it in the end. It's like I could go up to just about any woman and say whatever the hell I wanted, and it wouldn't affect me personally. I'm not going to do it because that would probably get me arrested or something at some point. But what you can do is just doing that and doing the work. You put that was our rite of passage, was out sarging and getting rejected over and over and over again, so that we could finally start getting laid if we wanted to. And most guys, they haven't gone through any hardship. Like their idea of hardship is the store on the corner is out of Ben and Jerry's strawberry cheesecake. That's their Vietnam.
Yeah, and that's why I wish guys, my, a lot of guys either don't want to or can't have success with women in that respect, or they don't have a silver tongue or whatever, and don't want to or can't kind of have a rite of passage by slaying a bunch of women.
That's because you said you went there too, didn't you? You started off, you said nerdy guy, eventually became a player, and then settled down and moved on from there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think any idiot can bang a lot of chicks.
Well, not any idiot, a charming idiot.
Anyone, but even you've seen I mean, for a price, any guy can get laid, right?
But
And
that's not
kind
the
of
same thing. I think you're right. We should use more specific language. It's not about getting laid. It's about influencing the world and getting that feedback. Like a hooker, you could be unattractive, haven't showered, whatever. You pay her money, you get it. There's no feedback mechanism towards you as a man. But a pickup, a girl that's doing you for free, you have to earn that. I don't mean to say you're earning the female approval. What I mean is you have to earn the ability to influence your environment around you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I forget where I started with this, but now I really lost myself.
Players picking up chicks is easy.
Oh yeah.
Any idiot.
My little history. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was deeply self-conscious and nerdy as a teenager. I was not a cool guy by any means. Then I kind of grew into myself, and kind of like a tiger or whatever that realizes that he can take down an animal. I realized, I can pick up chicks, and it's not that difficult, and I started to like it.
Damn you for ruining that woman for some future husband. Damn you.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't conscious of what I was doing because I was still finding myself by success with women. And, I did that for plenty of time and got my notches, but I didn't feel any better about myself. I mean, I knew I had success with women, but it didn't satisfy me. I was still playing along with what society wanted me to do, which was, be a frat guy and party and get laid. That's what I was doing. I wasn't thinking for myself.
Do you think you would have hit that revelation if you hadn't done it the hard way?
That's a good question.
See, myself, I'd say no, because I was the same way. It's what I first did my emails about was when I met a girl, I was running game on her, and about 15 minutes into the set, she let me know that we had already slept together, but I had no recollection of her, and that was like a watershed moment for me.
It wasn't one thing in particular that led me to this. I think a lot of guys never wake up because they aren't. I'm a very curious person. Like I'm always on Wikipedia looking things up, and I want to know how things work. Part of that's my nature. Part of that's being an attorney, is needing to know definitions and functions and stuff, asking why all the time. So I kind of arrived at that. I think a few years ago I realized, man, I'm, by all objective outside measure, I'm a prize or whatever. I'm tall, I'm a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. Why am I not happy? And that led me to these books about male psychology, and I had to take off. I had to go under the hood, so to speak, and figure out what was making me tick.
The intellectual dark hood.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what the hell is driving me to feel like such garbage? And you look at guys like Anthony Bourdain or any successful guy that kind of languishes and feels self-conscious or feels like he's a failure. And you see it at even the highest levels of performance in men. They just don't understand. And that's kind of where I was at. Like, why am I not happy? And I understood. I wasn't happy because I wasn't independent. I was still defining myself by external things, not by my own abilities. And that was kind of a watershed. Like, I'm not happy because I'm still living my life for other people.
Yep.
And that doesn't make me a narcissist because I still need to have this sense of the greater good, and that's what men are for, is protection of the community and protection of family and stuff. So I have to think externally, but I used the word in a tweet a while back, like emotional anchor. Like, I'm independent, I'm my own man. Nobody else can tell me what to do, but I have to think about what I can do for other people. But not just anybody, of course.
The people that show value to your life or that you've taken on as your tribe. Dude, that is narcissistic, by the way. And I think Twain had a great, and this is why I really recommend, I think you would really like it. It's a simple read, though, so you may not like that part. But He says,
no.
man
believe
is
me,
man
I did
isn't
not mean.
altruistic other than it soothes his soul, I think was the quote he used. So all that altruism generally, and it's the same as like Trump, for example, billionaire, doesn't need anything. He decided to be president of the United States. I don't know if it's true or not, but the rationale is he wants to leave a legacy. The idea is he's done so well, now he wants to help others, but that's still an extension of his ego.
No, I just think it's a case of Obama made a joke about him, and he's just like, "Screw this."
Oh, yeah. I remember that. That was the greatest video ever.
Oh yeah, where he's at that dinner or whatever.
Dinner, yeah.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing about that White House Correspondents' Dinner, though, is that I think that was the one where Seth Green made that joke about. They say that Bin Laden is hiding out in Hindu Kush, but did you know he hosts a show between 4 and 5 on C-SPAN? And while that was going down, they were actually getting ready to go after Bin Laden in Pakistan.
Yeah, that one was funny. But yeah, I agree. All this stuff, I think. And here's the thing I love. It's kind of, I always equate Red Pill to the Maslow's hierarchy, and that it's strictly right in the middle of that belongingness phase. Because it's obviously, we're not talking about survival stuff. Society's handled that. You won't starve. The nest egg, earning money, financial responsibility, that's kind of outside of our wheelhouse anyway. We don't talk about making money. That belongingness part is that part about picking up women or handling proper female nature, intersexual dynamics. You kind of extended past that, and that's where you're like, okay, well, I've got that. I've got my wife, I've got the kid, I've got the belongingness, I've banged chicks. What else is there? And that's when you start getting into those esteem and self-actualization. And I love it because it's seeing like you're basically I don't want to fluff you too much here, but I always like fluffing people. That role model, the male path. Like, here, if you want to write a passage, here's how I escalated each one of my wants and desires and then built onto them for something better. Now you're at that self-actualization part of it, which is essentially where everybody wants to be. And you shouldn't be Red Pill anymore because you're past that already. Whether Stedman knows that's what he's talking about or not is irrelevant, because I don't think he does.
Well, my main issue with that whole self-actualization thing is that a lot of time people go way too hard into esoterics and into obscurity and into things that are non-actual. And I think to some extent, there are things we cannot measure. There are things that are non-concrete and intangible that still have value and add something positive to your life. However, I don't think those are the things that should, to some extent, define you or define your actualization. Because how do you know when you're there if it's unmeasurable? It's not to say that you shouldn't strive after ideals or always try to get better. You most definitely should. However, if you're getting better at something, you have to be able to measure it. It's very hard to measure, how,
or at least map it to your real life. Yeah.
Yeah. How great you are at something. Okay. Who is the most cucked tradcon, for instance? Hard to measure that one because it depends on how do you define cucked and what scale do you define most on. So I just prefer, if you're going to have a debate about something or you're putting out life views or life philosophies or however you want it, it has to be debatable on some level. And if you hold one set of beliefs out of which none can be tested and I hold other ones, then what's the purpose of us debating other than to kind of have someone listen to us talk about their own narcissism for 45 minutes while thinking their narcissism is better?
because that's what's driving all of this. I mean, you're talking about narcissism and self-actualization. I would like men to reach their self-actualization, if I can say it, reach that before they get married. Preferably, yeah. Because I mean, if you are, once the cat's out of the bag, if you're insecure or you have a personal failing. I mean, it's you want to figure that out before you have an Apollo 13 moment. You should figure that out before you leave the ground, so to speak.
Before the consequences become real, yeah.
Yeah. Because otherwise, you're in a world of shit, and it may work out, it may not. So and for that matter, that is attractive to women. They don't want men who are insecure, and that insecurity will manifest itself. This is esoteric here, but this is what drives men underneath the surface. under our skin, inside, between our ears. It's flattering to think that we're wholly conscious all the time, but there's all that stuff going on in the background that we're not aware of, like background systems in a computer, right?
Mm-hmm. And as long as they're working, why change them?
Well, define working. I mean,
here we're getting this one now. Here's my thing on this. Yes, you're right. Define working, because if everything's going well, how do you know it's just not a bull market and you can glide past stuff or not? This has been a huge problem. 2017.
That's why it's important to have trials and tests.
Yeah.
And men used to have that naturally, but now everything is so safe and warm and effeminate, and you just glide.
Essentially, having a girl screw you over is the only hardship that's left for a lot of guys.
Yeah, a divorce. That's the one heart. Like, here's the only way to test a man: break his heart, take his kids from him, and take quite a bit of his money and shame him. That's your test, and that's horrible. And I would I think we discussed before, Ryan. Like, we need to make men divorce resistant or divorce proof before they get into serious relationships.
I was wondering if you wanted to talk about that, because I know you hate the same conversation time and time again.
I think it can hurt, because I lived that life, and I've experienced hardship because I wasn't ready. I thought I was ready because I was defining myself by everything else, by what other people were thinking. I wasn't truly agentic because I hadn't reached that self-actualization point before I got married, before I got into serious relationships.
Yeah, and we missed that one thing too on there, which I know we disagreed on. You say getting married is a good goal. I say it's not. And then we talk about the legal issues. And the point that we kind of stopped on was the one where you say if you're married, you automatically are assumed to be the father of whatever child's come out of that marriage, as opposed to like common law or not married, where you actually have to prove it. But then at the flip side is if you're married and it's not your kid because she cheated on you, then you have to actively prove that that's the case, and you have a short timeline to do that.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That was a falsehood put out, that it is a short timeline. It's not a short timeline.
Well,
it's a short
7
timeline.
years, isn't it, or something like that?
No, I mean, it depends on jurisdiction, and you guys are Canada and Ireland.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Based on your accent. I don't know your guys' law. I know our law in my state. And if memory serves, it's like 2 years after you were aware of the child not being yours. But if you don't know about it, the courts aren't that retarded. I believe it's a lot longer than just 7 years.
Right. There's some length of time anyway. We can quibble about how many years or how long or that. Yeah. But But here's the point of it then, is that whether you're front loading or back loading the responsibility of a guy's due diligence. So if you're not married, you have a kid, and you're going to hate this line of argument, that you have to actually do the work to show that you're paternally the father, as opposed to the married guy where you have to show the work to prove paternally you're not the father. Now, I would argue the former is better from a risk perspective, only because you're opting into a system, and by opting in, you have to do your due diligence, as opposed to having to opt out of something where the due diligence is just implied. I don't think guys, and you're right, most non-self-actualized guys, which is most guys, are not in a position to make those due diligence, like those hard choices. And I think it sets up way too many guys for failure.
It goes back to what we were talking about when we were talking about vetting a couple of weeks back.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if there's no realistic chance that the girl will actually fail, like no guy I've ever met who talks about vetting eliminated a girl from rotation after vetting her for 2 years. It just doesn't happen. So at that point, there's no risk of her failing. So what's the point of doing it in the first place? You're just doing something to kind of check, cross your T's and dot your I's.
Yeah, that pigeon superstitious experiment where you just push the button, and eventually a food pellet will come out, and you assume it's because you did whatever you did.
But I did want to get into one other kind of tangential thing on this, because I was thinking about the whole concept of marriage. And what you have to think about is, if you go back a couple of 100 years, your life didn't really change all that much after you turned 18 or 16 or whatever. You got a job, and then you basically lived more or less the identical life until you died. So, like my great grandfather was like this. He basically took over a farm when he was like 18, and every day he did the exact same things, depending on season around that farm until the day he died. And now, a lot of the time, let's say you get married at 20, girls 20, you're 20. You're going to do a lot of growing in your personal career, in your education, in your belief system. You're going to get a lot more experiences going on, vacations. Maybe you change jobs 20 times. And at that point, you have a lot of avenues for growth. So that's why growing apart actually became a thing. Because it didn't used to be that you grew a lot after you turned, like, let's say, 30 or something. Now you change almost more after you turn 30 than you do before you're 30. So a lot of the time, what I think Smeagol calls self-actualization, I would call personal growth in a sense. You come into yourself as a person through a lot of tests and experiences. And if you've been sheltered for the first, let's say, 20 years of your life, you just don't have those experiences. If you go from being sheltered to unsheltered, you're going to see a lot of change and adaptation. It's like going to the gym. If you've never lifted before, you're going to get a hell of a lot of newbie gains.
I think that's exactly right. And that's why, that's why I think, modernity has shifted things so far away from kind of, when I say traditional, I don't mean like Victorian. I mean like from the beginning of time to mid 20th century. Things have changed so much for men that you can't even consider getting married in your like early mid 20s because you don't know anything yet. You don't know hardship. You don't know yourself. You don't know your own goals, probably. You don't know women. I mean, you might know how to get laid, but you're not going to know the nitty gritty and how to handle them, or not necessarily how to handle them, but how to weather them.
Yeah.
Because that's really the thing. You don't know how to weather them and deal with them if you don't have a strong basis as an individual, strong resolve, strong agentic base, individualistic concept of yourself with which to deal with women. And women want to be pushed back, and a young man is not going to be able to do that. Aristotle said that the ideal age for a man to marry is 35. And that was, 400 BC or whatever it was, or earlier, I think. And the ideal age for a woman is 18. And that's, am I still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I lost Ryan's picture, but.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to the bathroom again. I'm not sure what the hell's wrong with him.
I appreciate the no visual. But I think that jives perfectly, I think, with human nature, because men need to have this period of trial and error, and women don't need that at all. Women are best when they're 18 or early 20s. I think the Spartans married when they were 20, or that was their recommended age. And that dovetails perfectly, I think, with human nature and the needs of each sex. Men are generally, aside from being entertaining and physically strong and such, we're kind of useless when we're young. I know I was. Most people were. We might be, physically strong and vigorous and such, but we don't know how to handle women, not for a long term, and certainly can't provide. And we're not going to have that independent thought and control over our emotions until we're, almost past our 20s, which is also when we know that the male brain reaches full maturity.
Yeah, it's also the fact that when you're 35, the big head have taken back control from the little head.
Yeah, which is also like, we talked about agency. I read off that list. Like you have to be able to control your urges and control your lust. When you're 20, I mean, you'll do anything for pussy, right? And you can get led around by the tail by a hot chick, right? And that'll destroy you eventually. But a guy who's 35, it's going to come to him. He will be rational enough to know what's in his best interest or not. And the likelihood that he'll be destroyed by that is much diminished.
I wouldn't even say rational enough. I'd just say experienced enough.
Well,
And this is that early pickup stuff. Yeah, you get your heart broken a few times. You start looking and you start noticing those patterns.
Yeah,
Although I
also,
guess, I mean, rational experience, we can use those interchangeably in that case.
well, it's also about, the whole thing with, if you have, like, if you're going to qualitatively say that one girl is a better prospect for marriage than another, because I think that's always going to be a qualitative judgment. So if you're looking to get into a relationship, whether that's marriage or if it's cohabitation or whatever it is, if you don't have any experience with women, then you don't have the necessary, let's say, palate to do that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like having,
Just guesswork.
yeah, it's like you can't be discerning about whiskey if the only thing you've ever had was Crown Royal.
I love that analogy.
That's it, though. You don't need to gain experience with women only by sleeping with them. It doesn't hurt, and I'm not a guy who's going to say is going to tell men to be virgins before they get married.
Yeah. Well, you can't avoid it. We can agree on that much, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like I said, that is not a very realistic goal. I mean, if you're a serious Christian and you want to do that, that's your choice. But that's, it's a choose your own adventure book. There's risk associated with that, just like there's risk associated with trying to sleep with 100 women. There's risk in that as well. It's just you have to think about what is right for you, not with what's best for not what is you don't
want to set yourself on fire to keep others warm.
Yeah, because you're not thinking for yourself, and you're not to the not because you are aspiring to be a monster and hurt people or whatnot, but the only person who's going to think about you is you. Your mom is going to think about you, but she doesn't know how to help you. Your dad might be able to help you, unless your dad is George Bruno. In which case he'll just say, "Oh, buckle up, son. Hang on, I gotta do this term." Sorry.
Don't be sorry. That was the highlight of the podcast.
Another thing, it is utterly cowardly to attack a guy who is erstwhile an ally. Like men, whether you call it chivalry or the code of samurai or whatever, men have a kinship, and it is utterly cowardly to turn on a guy like Rollo. Is it Rollo or Rollo?
Rollo, same as L.A. Confidential.
That's what I figured. Rollo, to turn on Rollo, and guys who are, you're pulling in the same direction. Bruno thinks that they're not, but it's utterly cowardly to me to turn on him. And I don't care about the backroom bullshit and what Rollo told a reporter or whatever. Who cares? Like it's just cowardly.
Dude, I think that's how women took over society, if we can argue that one. It's that that's always going to be the case because men suck at cooperating. This is where the whole trad Connie argument, if players just stopped banging chicks, then we would return to a bygone golden age. And it's like, that it's never going to work like that because, if every guy was like, no, we're not going to sleep around anymore. If you want to get some dick, you're going to have to be a good woman who cooks, cleans, and doesn't have a notch count in the high six figures. Your income should be in six figures, not your notch count. But then everything would be better. But the case is, the second every guy, there will be that one sneaky bastard who'll be going around like, hey, girls, don't worry. If you want some dick, just hit me up. I don't care about those other guys.
Yeah, it's like year one economics. Cartels do not work. They just don't.
Well, they could work because that's where slut shaming come in. Because women slut shame, men don't. Because slut shaming raises the cost of sex. And men want sex to be cheap and plentiful. Women want sex to be... That was the first person I think ever wrote on sexual economics was a female Harvard business school professor who wrote about the fact that, okay, women want sex. If every woman was like it was used to be, like you have to be married to get sex. That way you get male commitment and provision in exchange for sex. That's a high price.
Well, here, that's the thing. It's not a cartel. It's self-interest. Because back then, if a girl didn't have a man or her father, she starved in the street, because girls can't work in coal mines, or maybe they can, I don't know. But for the sake of argument, we'll say they can't. So you needed a man to survive. Otherwise, you'd starve in the street. So you had to get commitment from a guy. And the only value you had as a girl wasn't your coal miner salary. It was that, you can give them some kids. And so that's why they did the shaming. Unified wall, it's an emergent strategy. Everybody wanted to get a man, and the best thing you had to offer a man was guaranteed paternity. And that means, virgin. So of course they're going to shame other women to acting, because they're acting in their own self-interest. It's not a cartel. The cartel is like a side benefit of this.
Yeah, and that's one of those
now girls have jobs. They don't need money. There's an information economy. Technologically, we're advanced enough that you don't need a strong back. So that incentive is gone.
Yeah, and then you get this situation you have now where, the price of vagina used to be lifetime provision. Now it's 2 shots of Crown Royal.
Again with the Crown Royal, the Bruno of whiskeys. If I can return to Bruno for a second and talk about non-cooperation between men, I think there's a couple sources of this, and I think it's an interesting topic of why men have a difficult time working together or cooperating for things. You think back to the Crusades, and those guys weren't, they weren't effeminate. They were warriors. They were knights and nobles, but they had a terrible time accomplishing their goals, and they terrible fracturing. And you can see, whether it's in pro football or anywhere there's a lot of high testosterone men, there's a lot of dissension. There's a lot. Men have a difficult time working together, because when you're agentic, right? When you're thinking for yourself and your goals and your self-expansion are going to bump into other people's, and it's difficult.
So we only work together insofar as we're after that same goal, as long as the goals align.
We'll do what you want as long as you do what I want. Like it's difficult to have all those things going in the same direction without people kind of jostling each other, like race cars on the track, right? It's very difficult to get all these powerful men going in the same direction without bumping tires, right? But there's also non-cooperation because you have traitors, because you have men who are a little bit effeminate or are simply a traitor.
They're wired wrong. I hate using the word traitor only because Anthony completely ruined it for everybody by just spamming it at 3 a.m. when he's high off a Coke or whatever he does.
Well, the whole thing with I think men inherently have a kind of a meritocracy. We tend to organize around whoever's the best at what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the natural way men work together, and that's how the military kind of used to work too. Because
that's how wolves and gorillas and stuff work. Is there's the alpha, right? And what do all the non-alphas do? They assist the alpha.
Yeah, but that's the difference with them, is that they actually have physiological changes that symbolize it. Was it the gorilla gets like 300 times the testosterone and gets physically larger than the other ones in his tribe?
Well, the same thing happens with us. I mean, our testosterone, it's like the lobster. It's like Peterson's lobster. When you are feeling good and you're powerful, your testosterone goes up because your emotions are high and you are constantly challenged and your head's on a swivel and you're facing a challenge and you're pumped up all the time. If you're in the background and you aren't facing challenges very much and you're not the number one dog, our testosterone is going to go down. I
interesting.
myself,
I'm curious where you got that from. I'd actually like to look into that more.
Well, I forget where I read it. I think it was in that book by Dr. Podol's that our testosterone rises and falls with our emotions. And one thing I like to do to try to, again, because I live in the 21st century and surrounded by women, nobody's going to help me be a man except me. And so I exhort and encourage men to intentionally cultivate and place masculine things in front of them at all times. whether it's activities, music, what have you. Nobody's going to do it. Nobody's going to make you feel like a man except you.
Yep.
So you have to find things and sprinkle them in your day that keep you kind of jacked up. I tweeted something the other day, and people think it might be hokey, but it works. And what else are you going to do? The other day I was doing push-ups, and I love the soundtrack to Beowulf. So I put on that soundtrack, and I was doing push-ups to the beat of that song. And I felt jacked up. I felt like almost crazed because I was excited and I felt primitive, right? And I think every guy has to find that in them. Find that raw power that men innately have. You talk about like lost boys and these guys shooting up schools and guys that go through life fat and sad, and they've never felt powerful, physically powerful. They've never felt primitive.
Well, that's the thing I disagree with. I not so much disagree, but the feeling as opposed to actually being.
Well, both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure you can feel powerful playing Xbox Call of Duty.
Yeah, I agree. Right? But you can also feel that from a workout pump, but with a pump, you're actually moving towards a goal.
Yeah,
But I guess the push-up thing makes sense.
Yeah. And when you feel
the whole testosterone thing it gets banged on a little bit too much in this space. I think if your testosterone levels are within normal, they shouldn't vary that much. I tweeted the other day that sure, hops are not good for your testosterone, but if you're a pint of IPA away from being a girl, you have other problems.
All right. Well, hey, this has been a blast. I realize we're a little over time right now. We got Rule Zero on this channel, Rollo Tomasi and Friends, the Cancer Edition. It's coming on the half hour. Smeagol, this has been a blast. I actually have never had a chat with somebody before who isn't like on board 100% with the same stuff I'm on board with. So it was kind of neat having these little disagreements there, but truly appreciate you carving out the time out of your family schedule for us, man.
Well, I'm home alone for the week, so it was my pleasure. It was easy.
Oh, I hope you learned how to cook then, because your last foray at home was brutal to watch. All right.
Well, yeah, it's not difficult to cook chops on the grill, so.
Well, that's good. So I have a great story on that to end with an anecdote, though.
Give her.
Like, my grandfather, he was one of those men. He would starve to death in front of a stove. So when my grandma she was having surgery or something, and she was going to be gone for 2 weeks. So she prepped all his dinners for him and put them in individual portions in the freezer. So he just had to get them out and heat them up. First day, I dropped by his house, and he had one of these containers filled, sitting on top of the microwave. And he was sitting there eating biscuits, store-bought biscuits with butter on them. And I asked him, hey, why aren't you having your dinner? And he didn't know how the microwave worked.
I like that one. All right. So, hey, Smeagol, tell guys how they can read more of your stuff if they're interested in you, man. And then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, follow me on Twitter. I don't have any other platform. I don't have time for that, although I should. Follow me on Twitter or DM me. Oh, what's that?
And your handle?
Oh, it's at HIGHCIV79.
All right. On that note, guys, have fun. Enjoy your breakfast. We'll be back in 25 minutes with Rule Zero. Same channel, same bat time. Later.
Adios, guys.
All right. Holy fuck, I'm booming with the
thing. Drop right off.